Hi, and welcome to this AQA A-Level Business revision video focusing on 3.2.1, understanding management, leadership, and decision making. Today, we're going to be focusing on the difference between leadership and management, looking at the traditional leadership styles, and glossing over the Tannembaum and Schmidt continuum of leadership. A reminder that my teaching here is separate to my roles as a consultant or a teacher throughout the country. My name's Mr. Giles. Let's get down to business. So the first distinction we have to make is the distinction between management and leadership. Now, unfortunately, due to the changes in the specification post-COVID, this isn't as well looked at in the papers anymore. It used to be when we used to have the Blake-Mouton grid, but that's now been removed. However, a distinction is still important. I like to define it this way because there are no real hard definitions, but I like to explain it this way. Management is the managing of processes, and it's generally linked to efficiency. So any of you who've got a part-time job, I'm assuming you're of school age, you've got a part-time job, your bosses or your leaders see you as resources to manage rather than people. Okay, and that's a bit of a hard HR approach, and we'll kind of look on that in HR, but they see you as a process to manage. Do I have X amount of people in the building at the right time? Leadership, however, and this is from a wonderful quote from Simon Sinek, is taking care of those in your charge. It's not being in charge, that's what management is. It's taking care of those in your charge. So when we look over the traditional leadership styles and the Tannembaum and Schmidt continuum, take it with the guise of we're making decisions and leading people with their best interests at heart. Okay, that's how I want you to look at it. So that's the difference between leadership and management. Let's have a look now at the traditional leadership styles. Okay, so these are going to be your 4 traditional old school leadership styles. Now, the way to differentiate this from the Schmidt continuum is that when we look at these, we're saying that this is somebody's default setting. So you would describe someone as an autocratic manager, for example, or an autocratic leader, all right? And often when we teach leadership in lessons, we try and think of great heroes from our past. And we often think about, Winston Churchill. I dare say some of your teachers might have dipped into more kind of villainous people, but we're always trying to look at those people and think about what was their natural way of leading, okay? That's where we're coming from here. So it's your natural default setting. So first of all, we have autocratic, which is essentially do as I say. So this particular leader has all of the power and treats people as if they don't know what they're doing. Now, that might be in their best interest because if you take yourselves, for example, the first time you ever turned up for work, you probably didn't know what you was doing and you probably relied heavily on being told what to do, being micromanaged. All right, so this is generally pretty good for low-skilled workers. However, if you're looking for some form of innovation or anything like that, this isn't really the way to go. Up next, we have democratic. Democratic is that, well, what do you think? So the leader or manager might already have an idea in their brain, and then they might go, well, hang on, let me ask people who I work with or who I lead because they have expertise that I don't have. Now, they might not necessarily listen to you, but they'll take on board your ideas and your thoughts and your feelings. Up next, we have laissez-faire, which is French and it stands for do as you please. And this is the approach where leaders are very hands-off and they allow people full autonomy. Autonomy is to do a job how you want to do it. So they allow full autonomy. This is fantastic for getting creativity and innovation and for motivating highly skilled workers. But as you can fully imagine, if you allow people to do as they please, they often default back to their lowest efficiency setting. This was popularized a lot by Google and Microsoft, places like this, where if you kind of YouTube it, you would find pictures of their offices where basically people are just kind of sat on bean bags and playing PlayStation whilst at work because they're being quote unquote creative. Okay, so you have to be careful with this one. The last one, which doesn't get nearly enough credit as it should, in my opinion, is this concept of a paternalistic leader. And it's the concept of tough love. So it's the idea that a leader will chastise you and correct you like a parent might. However, they do it because they care deeply about their workers' well-being, etc., etc. And they'll often make sacrifices for the team. This really is the epitome of all of these kind of bunched into one, but it's very difficult to pull off because in order to be paternalistic, you have to have a great bond with your team, but you also have to be quite hard and quite tough on them, and your team have to be okay with that. It's a delicate balance. So these are the traditional leadership styles, and you'll probably find these in case studies, whether it's in your AS papers or your A2 papers. You'll find these in the case studies where they'll describe a leader in a particular way, and you have to work out whether or not that's the right thing. So just to recap: autocratic, very good for low-skilled workers; democratic, very good for medium-skilled workers who have particular expertise; laissez-faire, very good for high-skilled workers who are highly motivated and empowered; paternalistic, a general all-rounder that holds the line between lazy and efficient, but in a caring, considerate way, but is tough when they need to be. Let's have a look at the Tannembaum and Schmidt continuum. The Tannembaum and Schmidt continuum, I'll just call it the Schmidt continuum, or the continuum of leadership, is a very different approach than the traditional styles. I've not named it that, not because I can't smell their names, or maybe I can't. I've called it situational leadership because that's exactly what this theory dictates. And this is often the misconception that is missed when this is taught. This leadership style says that leaders and managers must shift along the continuum based off of the situation that they are presented. And essentially, I mean, there are more. If you ever get a chance to Google this, there's loads more to this than these four, but we just teach the four. Essentially, you can either, as a leader, tell your workers what to do. Sounds very autocratic, doesn't it? You can try and sell an idea to workers. So you have in mind what you want and you want to get your workers to do it, but you try and do it with a bit of a carrot or a stick situation. So there's some sort of incentive. You can either consult with your workers, it sounds very much like democratic, where you have an idea in your mind, but you want to gather expertise from other people. Or you can join your workers, and that's that laissez-faire approach where you let workers get on and you merely join them when you feel that you can help them, or you simply approach them and say, how do I help you execute what you need? And you just let them get on. Now, what are the situations that require these types of leaderships? So a manager's going to turn up to work, or a leader's going to turn up to work, and they're going to observe what's going on. Generally speaking, a leader will move to a tell style of leadership when one of two things needs to happen. Number one, fast decisions need to happen because the leader or manager will just make the decision and tell what's going on. The second event is in a crisis. So if a business enters a crisis or the external environment creates a crisis, a leader will revert back to the tell style of leadership because it needs a very rapid reaction. This is not a crisis is not a situation to be asking workers what they think. Decisions need to be made fast before failure occurs. So that's when we use tell. Sell is less of a crisis, but more of a change that needs to happen. An example of this, and it's not a great example, but it could be redundancies. Now, what they often do when they do redundancies in large firms is they do voluntary redundancies. So they try and sell the idea to workers. Look, hey, anybody want to retire? Anybody want to be made redundant? Here's the package that's on offer. And it's a bit of a sell situation. People need to be made redundant. We've got to reduce the wage bill, or we've got to reduce the workforce. But we just don't want to do it in this situation because this one will leave a bad taste in the mouth. Whereas this one, at least it was my decision to go. I'm going to go on to other things. So we sell that idea. The situation for consult is when the decision doesn't need to be made fast, but it requires delicate expertise that the managers don't have. Now, generally speaking, we're getting to the end where we're looking for some sort of creativity or innovation. Now, a really good example or situation for consult is any business that has like a geographical kind of hierarchy, because you would go and ask the local kind of teams what their opinions of the decisions are before you make them, because they have expertise in that area. And then lastly, the situation for join is when you want maximum creativity, maximum innovation or differentiation. And this is generally used by your technology companies because they want their workers to have the freedom to be as creative as humanly possible. The reason for that is, number one, you can't tell workers to be creative. That's not how it works. And number two, you can't ask a worker to be creative and then chastise them for that. You can't be strict on about it, whereas this is quite a strict approach. So the leader's going to arrive at the situation and they're going to decide which is the appropriate leadership style. And what that does is it allows your workers to be led in the appropriate way for the appropriate time. If you've got a part-time job and you've ever been told what to do in a situation that didn't really need that, where a split-second decision wasn't really required, you'll probably know how jolting that is. Or worse, if you kind of work under a tell-style leadership or an autocratic leader, but you have an idea, but you just don't bother speaking up. Whereas from the Schmidt Continuum, hopefully the leader will recognize what the appropriate leadership style is. So we've looked at our traditional leadership styles, we've looked at the Schmidt Continuum and when it's appropriate, and now we know the difference between managers and leaders. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below. I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you very much.